Okay. In the Heart Sutra in English on page 2. Thus, at one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Ultra Peak Mountain, with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of these lessons. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena of all profound impurities. At the same time, Nimble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasaya, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the 5 skandhas and their natural entities. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasaya, how should a son of a lineage trained who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasaya answered the Venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow and practice the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The 5 skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight, and so on, until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so on, up to no old age and death, and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell on the 3 times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom, and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not to self. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi. He said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara, that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of a lineage, it is so. The son of a lineage, simply is just so. The profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have thought. And the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and gandharvas, rejoiced to praise the words of the Blessed. Ramadan, Lord Jesus, Chambe, Yamba, Chatsam, Gangi, Lundru, Dripti, Trendra, Ina, Nada, Rase, Tungu, Jiji, Siji, Niji, Toga, Levanze, Kanda, Sibi, Zora, Mare, Tone, Jisri, Joso, Lama, Puji, Tazi, Yana, Chuchu, Yale, Son, Rudra, Chiro, Nyemo, Nyen, Lady, Charo, Juze, Mese, Tone, Nyoku, Chingi, Juze, Dena, Dene, Tachi, Saju, Tachi, Yude, Luzi, Kesi, Tulu, Chuda, Chuda, Chudi, Jendre, Dale, Champe, Yama, De, Om Arapazana, De, Om Arapazana, De, Om Arapazana, De, Seden Cheki, Kenra, Vezedi, Talati, Mupavapsane, Kadan Tenje, Utopai, Odrupope, Nagwatsel, Duso. Continue with the short Madonna offering process. Saji Puki Jushi Betotra, Jija Niji, Li Diamati, Sanyi, Indo, Lili, Puai, Udanda Jingla, Chubara, Shu. Jetsun Lama Damba Jena Di Chubu Kala Jinsen Rinne Chidra Sambe Tuji Zemala Sabji Chugi Chaba Abdu Rena Medela Gani Yata Mi. Continuing with the refuge prayer on page 22. Sanje Chodan
Soji Chona La Chanju Lani Yosuji Dagi Jinruji Sonaki Chola Pinji Sanje Dura Shu
Sanje
Chodan Soji Chona La Chanju Lani Yosuji Dagi Jinruji Sonaki Chola Pinji Shu Chudan Suji Chuna La Chanju Pado Dane Josuji Dagi Suji Be Sunangi Jola Peji Sangi Jubara Shu. Ohonas. 당아도 세제대 카툴로 쉬샨데 들어왔대. 아, 때 덴바시 때한테 도와라. 개님말라데 깨드 동네 시바 시기와 전에 말해도나. 아, 깨드 동네 시바 시기와 데니 데이 군중 자전데 데고반에 타르와 라데 람 테도 파글람 예라 제데라스 어디 책지디 야다 죽숨데비도나.
Let's read the root verse, the verse 114. This rebirth is suffering, and that which is called craving is the wide range originator of that. The stopping of this liberation is liberations, and the pathway mind for the attainment of that is eightfold. Those branches of an Arya's pathway mind.
어허. Oh, yeah.
Can you say that again?
Nima, could you repeat, please?
So,
단지기대 코메 있어요. 단지기대 대 카바디 야고면도.
oh, listen. So I'll repeat again. I'll repeat. Gisela just read the verse 114, so we'll just read this verse. This rebirth is suffering. That which is called craving is the wide range originator of that. The stopping of this is liberation, and the pathway mind for the attainment of that is eightfold, and those branches of an Arya's pathway mind.
다 데려봐. 되게 덴바시 덴나게 도와. 다디 덴바시 덴다네 컨데르스나 게디 스디 다 바기 시그널다 다다 예나메나 게디 스디 다 마란조 게시지야 이게 다디 다 제가나 지기 동네 영사기 대 가서 그래. 시디 다 동네 덴바시 내면도 걸어와서 내면도 그러와. 어디 개바데 칸에 용거래스나 안에 동네 덴바네 용거래스. 동네 덴바데 가래스나 다 기지 콜로코도 그게 사진이랑 풍부들어 봐. 어디 지러 봐. 아니 대내 대의 군중 자체인데서 와. 대의기 아니 동네 덴바데기 주 아니 군중 덴바데레스. 군중 덴바데. 아니 다 군중 덴바데 파 매와스는 디 시디즘발라 군중 덴바데 파 각베 고바데 안에 타르바레스 와. 다 타르바 라디 람스디 아니 대 타르바데 칸데스 토고레스나 안에 람게 덴발라 때문에 안에 람게 덴발라 때문에 안에 타베 람데 토바치고레스 다 람대양 다지당 람데세야들야 티버 튜몽기 샤다세나 안에 팔람이야라게 어디 팔람이야라 제디 계산가 좀 가는지 쉬차래 어디 라테네 안에 동네 고백에 타베 람데 토바치고레스 어딘데 손샤
So this verse actually talks about Four Noble Truths, how the suffering coming into being, what is the causes and condition of the sufferings, how can the suffering can be eliminated, by what means the suffering can be eliminated, in other words. For that, it says this birth is suffering, which talks about suffering, the truth of suffering. And that which is called craving is the wide range of originator of that, which is the origin of suffering. And the stopping of this is liberation. And the pathway mind for the attainment of this eightfold, or for the attainment of that is eightfold. So those branches of the Arya's pathway mind. So this talks about the Four Noble Truths and how the suffering coming into being, what is the causes and condition of suffering, and how the suffering can be eliminated, by what means the suffering can be eliminated.
어디데 인데다 산지 점된데기 최기 콜로 탕보데 다 데려봐 덴바시 치고 다 산이나니 두버치시 알아서 배박에 두버치시는 여러 어디도 안에 두버치시데 산지 점된데기 최기 콜로 탕보 덴바시 치고 거기 다 두주 데려봤어.
So this is the first turning of the will of the Dharma by Buddha after his enlightenment, and pretty soon will commemorate the Buddha's first turning of the will of the Dharma. It's into Futseji, into heaven, which means the 6th month of 4th of the 6th month of Tibetan lunar calendar, which is the day that commemorates Buddha's first teaching of the will, first turning of the will of the Dharma.
어딘데 인데 좀 발라야 아 마란족이 덴바시 있어야 돼 배대 지금 가서 그래 아 덴바시 시엠바치야다 덴바시 고미야데 빼마시 개침버리셨어
So we all should really understand that meditating on four noble truths and by understanding four noble truths is something that is a fundamental for all of us as a Buddhist practitioner.
그러니까 대 마란조 지 단다 안에 찬주기 셈세야다 안에 동반이 있어야도 백개다 전부 쉬우지 여러 왔대 rồi cái đó全部修正人家讲了呀类似那能啊这建筑了说吧就是别嘛是通过修正了吧他这种老人看自己有没的娘说看自己连通没的啊嘛给我呢点不起给那么着就是也不行嘛现在那那个都是
So we have all kinds of practices, very well-known practice such as practice of bodhicitta, wisdom realizing emptiness, something that is very, very well-known practice, and it is a profound practice. And not only that, but also a practice of sacred Mantrayana, in which where we have involvement of practice and such as generation stage and completion stage, and all those teachings, all those practices, whether those practices will become as successful or not, whether this practice will become an actual practice or not, or give you a fruitful practice or not, entirely depends upon one's profundity, the understanding of the profundity of this Four Noble Truths, without which all this practice cannot be, become a successful.
어딘데 인데 좀 말이야 나란 쪽에 막이 덴바시 남샤도 약보지 신비 인비나 안테네 여기 다지 강기 동반이다 천주기 심사도 솔라 대막이 오디기 슉 잡네 안테 솔라야 배저 마체랑체 대조 지 롭존 지야다 고미야 대조 배 마체랑 체리지 용사레스 대마 인바체 안에 막이 오기 덴바시기 남샤도다 대조고 코로나다 코발레 독단도 간제지면 하마고 버체 안에 다베지 찬주교 심신의 자침부 시부지를 샤스는 동반이 있는 배우 자침부 시부지를 샤스는 안에 지 조가 제비나 대지 다가지기 쇼테서 말했어.
So it is therefore, if one lacks this practice of Four Noble Truths, proper understanding of Four Noble Truths, and proper contemplations and meditation on Four Noble Truths, regardless of how much we practice, such as bodhicitta, wisdom realizing emptiness, the practice of sacred Mantrayana, one will not be able to understand how sentient beings are revolving within the cyclic existence, and how one can reverse this cyclic, existence, or the order of this cyclic existence. So if one has a proper understanding of this Four Noble Truths, well, then enables one to understand how the beings are revolving within the cyclic existence, and how individual can reverse this taking rebirth in cyclic existence. So in other words, very understanding of your Four Noble Truths will become a driving force for one's progression on the spiritual path, such as bodhicitta, wisdom realizing emptiness, and so forth.
어딘데 인데 다 산지 좀 된데게 동해 댐방 어쩌나로 당부 동해 댐방 어쩌나 대제라야 동해 댐방 강리 용세 시군중 댐방 어쩌나 안에 대 방배 방바 토비야 여바다 안에 방배 방바 토비야게 체도 남 칸지지 공거 유메 안에 베마시 세보체네 땡로스.
So it is therefore Buddha has first identified this for sufferings and introduced this very identification of the suffering to his followers, which then how the suffering is coming into being, which is introduction to the of us, the source of the suffering, so the origin of sufferings, and then is the possibility of overcoming of this origin of the sufferings, and by what means the origin of suffering can be eliminated or be overcome. So this is how Buddha actually taught in a very sequential order, in a very proper manner, or proper sequential order to his followers.
제가 나도 니마 안에 지 방법도 봐 안에 지 가족들다 취를 대바져보지 여러 봐. 근데 인디 좀 발라야 안에 지 하다고는데 야 제도 좀 발라 안에 다 시에망보다 차망보 되게 직접zor라야 직지다보다 다 상황도 봐도 저zor라야 배마시기 직 대화 첨보로 보지 차. 여봐. 안에 한 산지 좀 된데 스튜디오 산지 좀 된데 고대도 제도 안에 이샤샤르 낭매라고 보지 쇼도도 산지 좀 된데 고대라 시다기 좀 맞춰지 덤바스디 좀 발라야 지 다가지 지 저거 지금도 안에 테마 임바고 되는 이 담도 좀 고제 되는 배데 시부지 자친 보지고 지기도 봐 제기 제베서리지.
So sometimes I feel that, we have more kind of faith and devoted when we see those, the image of the meditation deities he does, rather than one should having drawn towards the Buddha's image. When we see this, the meditation of deities at the multiple faces, arms, such as Vajraparavas and Guesamaja, and so on and so forth. When we come to see those images, we generate an immense faith and devotion to those, by means of seeing those images. But when we come to see this Buddha Shakyamuni, the image of Buddha Shakyamuni, we're kind of in a very neutral and kind of not having a very, intensity of one's feeling and having a faith towards Buddha Shakyamuni is lacking. And this is what it happens in our general society.
어딘데 인디 다 등상지 가서 그래다 지 기회신이 같은 게 아니 산지의 송대솔라야다 산지의 송스네메도 공기 송다 뜻해서 가서 그래다 공기 송세고로 왔다 공부로도 송다다 그좀마 칼레칼레 마제니 텐데 제운데 좀 말아야 아는 거네 단에 다 뒤자 가서 그래 아 담제나네 베데 대화 치수 조사르지다 산지 좀 된데 차대도 하다 오늘 잔에 베디지 가서 그래 당안 졸라야 베디지 가서 그래 랑도르게 람뜬게 다 대자고지 다 직딩 감라야 덤바 대자고지 다 신다 매바데 되네 세명이 얘기도 왔어.
So that happened to myself when I was younger, as a Buddhist follower of Buddhist Buddha Dharma, and when I come to see those image of medicinal deities, have immense sort of faith and so forth. And when I see the Buddha's image, sort of, the faith or the devotions that I had was kind of moderate at that time. However, fortunately, it is due to the kindness of our gurus. We have received numerous teachings on the Buddha, or teachings of the Buddha Dharma, teachings that are commented by the great Indian masters such as Nagarjuna and so forth. As a result of receiving those teachings, now I'm very convinced there's no other teacher who could actually give such a profound teachings other than Buddha Shakyamuni. And so it is through receiving the teachings and contemplating on Buddha's teaching, one will able to have this, inconceivable faith, irreversible faith. One will be able to generate irreversible faith towards Buddha Shakyamuni. That's all.
근데 인데 좀 발이야. 지 가서 그래. 다 당가랑 게 섬주의 시위 나 당가랑 좀 지금 감대가라야 당가랑 좀비 가서 그래. 다 멤버 현다 수직이 제주 마토기 나자지 다 콩기 제주네 당가랑 저 나랑 졸라야 저랑 나자 대도다 쓰네. 나랑 저기 나자대 배던 배디 멤버 현다 수직이 하마고 그게 나자대 콩거 하고 와. 나랑 저기 내대 콩기 하고 하는 봐. 하고에 맞아 저랑 나자대 도다 쓰네. 나자대 된 대대 맞아 나자대라 맨데 팽게 도다 쓰네. 맨데 마 ngotrnang tende chedi sambala ya pede chikaso gore ta sidin ti kham de ga la ya ta ngone thane member da go de be chodo gi go de khore do as.
So I personally feel the Buddha is a great physician that no other physician can be compared. He's an incomparable physicians who actually be able to identify the sickness or the illness that no physician on this planet Earth have ever discovered the sicknesses. And not only that he discovered that sickness, but he introduced the sickness to the numerous beings, the numerous disciples or the followers of the Buddha. And he taught how do we really what kind of medications or the medicine that can cure the sicknesses. And he introduced precisely of all the medicine to those followers to overcome the sicknesses, that nobody would be able to overcome the sicknesses. And he has given all the skills. And so therefore, I personally feel that in this planet, not only this planet Earth, I would say, but in entire cyclic existence, there's no physician can be equal the knowledge that Buddha has.
제상 공긴 아란솔라야 유야기 아니 풍부디 대화 말이 동네 말이다 쓰네와 동네 템바 쓰네 telaya 민코라 두자지단제 다디 동네 템바 쓰네 다디 동네 템바 사지 녀랭기 풍부 코르와 쓰네 telaya 민코라 텐데지단네 다디 아란솔라 여바 지시도 아니 아란솔라야 가서 그래 대화 타도 버지 매바다 동해랑 동해 장장 용고야 여바 임바지 콩게 대망어 전화로 왔어.
So therefore, he taught this of this aggregates, the psychophysical aggregates, is what is called the origin of the suffering. It is in nature, it's a suffering. And so long as you have this contaminated aggregates, taken a rebirth with contaminated aggregates, we will never find a lasting or the genuine happiness unless you find the actual remedy for overcoming of these sufferings. That's what.
대상 나라 동네 팀베게 월라 대여버지 나란주 직신원도 사제 년랭기 풍부 쿠르지 쿠르드 여버데 나란주 하고도 좀 발라야 아니 사제 년랭기 월라 대여버지 하고도 아니 지 수수수수라 창신지야 돼 중으로 직도 좋아 수수수수라 야지 가다가서 그래 차바다 신바치야 돼 중으로 직도 아니 지 소속의 나제다 뽑아다보도 저 중으로 직도 아니 직다 나가 세네베 가도 있나지 나제 버진바지야 되다 시라시라게 고 나세야디 야보지 나세나다다 사제녀랭게 풍부 사제녀랭게 쿠르쿠르지 되되게 당가라 야보지면 하고 온데 한 대원에 안에 지 나제다 뽑아차도야 정신충으로도야 대가고란 게 편수 톡이 있어 왔어.
So when we are able to identify this suffering, once on rebirth alone, the rebirth with this contaminated aggregates, one will then be able to see that we are not very free from sufferings. And we'll understand that how much suffering there we are undergoing, having how we are remaining under the control of their sufferings. And suffering are something that is so intense and very, controlling over us. And when we come to this, when we come to understand this, then and as a result of understanding this, one's attachment towards one's body and so forth will be, mitigates. And similarly, one's clinging towards this body as something that is eternally existence will be reduced, and one's pride or egoistic thoughts that one may have will be reduced. And not only that, but also at all time when we have a feeling of I, and I is something that we really cherish from the depth of one's heart, and those cherishment towards oneself will be diminished.
어디 다 텐데체 동네 템바사제 텐데체 다 대오라 아니 동네 칸레 주메주 다 군중된 바로와 다 군중된 바델라야 지단 유모마보 요르데 대나네 되자시단 띠무 대숨데로와 다 대나네 되자시단 띠무나네다 지당 최유메 참말로나네 아니 다 컨트롤 가고 치기다 요마로와 시당라야 시당 컨트롤 가고 치기다 시라 요마르다 가시기 다지 공도 시당 사고도 졸라야지 야보레스 되라 단계래지면도 망치와게 다 공도 산나 둔주이나다 미나 공도 사게 될야 수직을 가고 지금 말와 공도 될라 참말로기지 야보지기 말와 다 이나 대나네 되자라야지 야보레지 지되게 빼마시 망보라 되자데 빼다 괜라 지되게 다 대나네 아니 가서 그래 timu segmareda mariba 단지 mariba segorwata timu chön남지 내로 무슨도 마통게 텔라야다 timu seming다로 다 제제되게 마숭 두기다 산지 좀 된데마도 정말와 제장 어디 마송투게데 다 콩게데 나서 때와 아마 띠띠디 다 콩게 송도
So then here, our origin of our sufferings. When it comes to the origin of our sufferings, there are many origins actually, origin of our sufferings. Out of all, the principal origin of our sufferings are the three poisons of the mind: attachment, aversion, and ignorance, and particularly of ignorance. And so now, when aversion has many divisions, such as anger, hatred, and so forth. But when it comes to the anger, that not there could be a little possibility that someone may think that anger is something that is good and something that really boosts you up and something that really supports your rights and so forth. And generally speaking, that everyone can identify anger as something that's negative. Everyone would say that anger is not good, right? However, when it comes to attachment, there are many, most of the beings who consider attachment who would not actually find having attachment is something that is false. It is not, right to have attachment. Nobody have this, not many will have idea of, inappropriate of having attachment. But they always, attachment is something that is natural to all of us. So this is how in general, how people would actually consider. So particularly when it comes to ignorance regarding ultimate nature of reality, nobody are aware of that. This ignorance is something that really gives us all kind of problem. It just putting us in. It just put us into, problematic situation from the beginning of time up until now. It is only Buddha who actually identified this ignorance with regard to how things really are, or the ultimate nature of reality, is something that is the source of all our sufferings, and who Buddha is the only person, individual, only teacher who actually identified this ignorance as a source of all our sicknesses.
어디체 되네 다 어디 다또 사제 년랭기 풍부 동네 템바 코로와스네 다 디제 상마들 주고 주서 찍지 어디 대파 매바 소발라야 대주 군중 템바 매바 소고와 대주 군중 템바 매바 소베 매바 소투비야 요와 가르에서는 군중 템바데 아니 로 친지 로 임바 다디 수베 그 고바 토비야 요바 다디 고바데 토발라야 아니 추남지 내루 지도바 신도 또베 아니 박베람 다메 또베 셰럽 귤라 제거바 어디 송연도 되네 산지 좀 된대기 가서 그래 다 송대 빼마지 못 살진지래도 왔어
So it is then through the teachings of the Four Noble Truths by the Buddha, and how this suffering of our aggregate, that's suffering nature of our aggregates, in other words, our contaminated body is coming into being. What kind of causes and conditions that is there of this sufferings, of this cyclic sufferings. And how do we actually overcome this origin of this sufferings? Is there any possibility that we can overcome this origin of sufferings? Not only he has just given these teachings, but then he went on to say that there is a possibility of overcoming the origin of suffering, because the origin of suffering itself is unmistaken way of our worldview, the mistaken view, that erroneous view of self and other phenomena. So therefore, if we are able to understand that our view of self and other phenomena are something that is erroneous and something that is mistaken, then we will be able to understand that there's a way that we can reverse this mistaken consciousness or mistaken mind, and to how do we really make this error that we have as a result of not understanding how things really are. So then with this will then give you and encourage oneself to be able to achieve cessation from the sufferings. And this cessation from the suffering can then be generated or can be accomplished as a result of understanding how things really are. That's all.
라서 어디 된다고 가서 그래. 동해 규도 제법 방계기 람 파베람 다 담에 무슨도 또베 파베람 어디 톱에 치도 대 톱에 치도스나 다대 톱야게 제도 안에 대 톱에 예라라야 안에 팔람 예라 제들이 했어와 파베람 예라 제 파베람 예라 제 기상에라 쉬버나시 양답에 따와 양답에 초와 양답에 저바 양답에 템바 어디 대게라 장바 전나 마지나 어디 파베람 예라 제들이 샤스
So then the very means of overcoming all the suffering that we talked about earlier, not only the suffering, but the suffering with their imprints, or the suffering with their causes and conditions, entire causes and conditions. So what means that one can overcome the suffering? The very eightfold noble path that we talked about during our previous sessions, such as the right view, right speech, right effort, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right meditative concentration, and right actions. Those are the eightfold noble truths which actually becomes actual remedy towards all the sufferings.
어디지 다 지지 야다 주시되지 아니 어야 팔람 제들에서와 대다른 라베 파베 덴바시 통화라 길에 따도 점버기 빵나 빼네 김번남지 장 세베 녀모 주고 레게기스
Then let's go to the next verse, to verse 115. With it being like that, you need always to strive for the sake of seeing the four truths of the Aryas, even householders in whose laps rest glory, can with awareness, for the fourth cross, the rivers of the disturbing emotions.
Yes. 야. 다디 직디기 대세다 버데 틴데 인도스 대달라베 틴데 인도 안에 파베 덴바시데 안에 통화를 길에 시대좀 발라 퍽배 덴바시 다 가서 그래 다 시에바라 집에래도 스나면도 안에 수수규를 제베 집 덴바시긴 다 수수규를 세마기 이제 장배지 덴바시 내주 안에 제바 지외래도 안에 계란게 따도 안에 준주의 지시어스라 준주의 지시어스 다데 제부터 선보는 담버와 라스
So this is how the Arya Nagarjuna has given advice to his friend the king, by saying that these are the actual remedy for your sufferings.
야 근데 이제 대 제바 제고야게 좀 내려데 가르렌스나 빵나 베네 김반남지냐 시에베 녀모 추 레게 지이스르와 안에 빵 수리는 발라다 지 다들이 제보되지 성보도 제보르와 아니 빵나네 봤을 다 코라 제보게 틀은 내비 이나야 제보게 틀은 대비 이나야 아니 어 제보게 틀은 대비 이미 이나야 아니 보다 제보가 틀어 대비 이미 있나야 안에 뒤치기 도와서 가서 그래 어, 제보가 틀어 대비 이미 있나야 제보가 틀어 대지 제보가 배 롱죄로 롱죄버게 아니 김바 있나야 rab도 좀 아마 이바지 김바 있나야 아니 덴바시기 내주신 덴바시기 내주 공부할 때네 아니 뉴몽바데 추불라 배샤네로 뉴몽바게 추불레 아니 바게 두그레스
So here it says, when all beings who is able to understand these Four Noble Truths, the Aryas, the four truths of the Aryas, in other words, not only the monastics, but even the householders, in whose laps rests glory, is referring to Buddha, referring to his friend, the king, who is actually, always being in the worldly, luxurious existence. So even though if the householders who actually have a proper understanding of Four Noble Truths and engage in the practice followed by the Eightfold Noble Path, can cross the rivers. The river here refers to the cyclic existence, rivers of the disturbing emotions.
알았어 대나라 가서 그래 대 카바데라 로조로 지금도 권다스 대 로조나 대 샤주케사레스라 아니
The battery is almost running out, so when we run out the battery, so we will just stop.
고마마소스 아니 어딘데 인데 좀 발라야 산지 좀 된대지 산지 좀 된대기 아니 최마 송대 좀 발라야 리기 포모스네 송요레 마도지기 텔라야 안에 최치기라 인지 민지기 타와 지고레 잡도 중화 지고레스 자원인의 송요 말했어봐 다 약보 중나 원래 제나 안에 잡도 중 안에 최체나데 최 휴지와 제도로 와 이나양 선제 좀 된데기 최마 송샹교디 지금 차상라 마송샤요레 마도지기 타와글야 양지지다 양지 kimbalaya 양지 마와라고 텐데 송샤죠 요마레 티버침벽이 최담지 kim바다라도 좀 차상라 직버 직양 송요레 대난에 상아도지 티버디 안에 때나 바기 단다 퍼진 티베 나라 제비나 전주 timba 시보 탐마바데 상계가 로보데 안에 대치고로 봐. 아, 텔라 때문에 가서 그래. 개별로 지나 때문에 상계고로 와. 나 특별로 개바도 뱀이 안에 예와촌에면도 아니가로 올라야 세질 루질로 상계하게 누버도 와.
So it is therefore when the Buddha has given the teachings, he is giving the teachings equally towards all sentient beings, regardless of who they are. He has not given the teachings, something that is completely different to the household individuals than the bhikshus and bhikshunis or the monastic orders. Rather, when it comes to the teachings, it's given teachings equally to everyone by understanding their inclinations and spiritual inclinations and their dispositions. Particularly when it comes to the teachings of the Mahayana teachings, there's no differences. The teachings have no difference in terms of the teaching that are given to the bhikshus and bhikshunis and teaching that is given to the household individuals. Particularly when it comes to the teachings of the sacred Mantrayana, there's no differences at all. There's no slightest differences at all. Although we might see a little difference in the Sutrayana teachings or the perfection teachings, where it's stated that whether the individual, the practitioner, who progressed on the spiritual path of seeing, from the path of seeing to the meditation and so forth, and path of normal learning, before that bodhisattva who is on the peak of existence of the path of meditations, when such bodhisattvas, the female bodhisattvas, has to take a form of male form in order for the individual to gain state of enlightenment. This is such teachings that we find in the sutra system. However, when it comes to the Tantrayana or the sacred Mantrayana, there's no differences at all. Everyone, whether be it as a female or male, everyone has an equal opportunity to gain the state of enlightenment without transforming one's own physical body.
Ishila, do we need to stop?
Some sagas.
라.
Some
좀
sagas.
샤나 디서리. 네, 주동지라자 안에 좀 샤샤.
So just pick. Krishna saying just to some conclusion and then we'll stop.
So dedication very short.
그래서
He'll summarize the teachings a little bit and then we'll stop.
Okay.
어딘데 인데 점발이야. 테나바이나 검자야를 가보러 봐. 검자야를 가고 인데 맨날 단내에서 검지 잡투이나 안에 가서 그래. 나랑 저기 다 메즈데 턴다 된 바지. 차야게 빼마시제와 첨부 요레스. 딘데 인데 점발이야 나랑 저 다르게 메즈데 턴다 된 바지 전부 있나? 대제마데 텔레야스 대제마데 텔레야데 전에 나랑 저 오늘 단내 ngenge angwenje tambe kibu tamba na banasi ane kewa khashi ke chela ya ane thabe lam simbaji yongres.
So if we can take our time, not only just listening to the teachings, but if whatever that we have listened to the teachings or studied the Dhamma, we should put an effort to meditate on it. And it is through meditation one will be able to bring about the transformation of one's mind and become oneself as a better human beings, and to be able to make our life more meaningful, not only this lifetime alone, but then it is as a result of one's pure practice of this lifetime one's future life will be better and better, and finally be able to attain the supreme state of enlightenment as the past great being had been attained. That's all.
텐데지 나랑도 야보추나 텐데 나랑도 메제 된다 템바지 차도 오르와시 나랑도 지 가서 그래 다 잠불링기 다 보다고지 임비네 잠불링기 다 보지다보지 차베 있네 임데 로준이 시지 다 잠불링기 다 보차레 마도 대제를 마지 시차스나나 안치 감에바 차차로 대제를 마시 차스나 지 감에바 차차로 다 취지 제비나 안에 대대제 마들라 키도야도
So if one is able to do this, then one will be able to make one's life meaningful. Otherwise, even though that we may have a wealth that can fill the entire universe, but when it comes to when we face this ultimate journey, there's nothing else can accompany us other than one's practice of Dharma.
원라서 당하라서 나발린 얘기 마침마다 요말에 다른 권장도 숨도 제대 이나양아랑도 동네 템바데 미숙한 시위스 또 가사라 템바시데
So this is Four Noble Truths. It's a very brief Four Noble Truths. We had a discussion on that. It is very fortunate for all of us.
아야
Begin with the final dedication prayers on page 29. Jabel Puru Jita
마나 군도 상보데야 대신데 대다 군지 제소 달로지 개와 대다 담제라도 뒤숨시베 야와 담제기 뭐와 간다 초도 나와데 다신 개베다와 대변야 상보 주지라도 아지 오케이
Stop.
오케이